Here we go. Computations involving function notation. You have done this since Algebra 1, but we're going to dig a little bit deep and try to go through this. We're going to try to go through it pretty quickly, okay? The notation, this, you know that it's read f of x. You know that. When you see f of x or g of x or h of x, it means you are dealing with a function. And a function has very special properties. Main one being passes the vertical line test. Yes? Every x matches exactly one y. That's what a function is. Now, we look at that function right there. Very quickly, do it in your head. Can you find f of -4, f of -1, and f of 0? Go. Why are you staring? Okay, you got it on your notes. Direct substitution. If x is -4, -4 plus 3 squared times -2 plus 4. Okay, go do the other two. What's f of -1? -4, good. What's f of 0? -14. I want you to look right here. When you found f of -4 and you got 2, what does that mean? What did you find? The y value when? Good. You found the y value when x is -4. That's what this is. You can get it off your notes later. The graph of f is pictured to the right. Do the results of f of -1 and f of 0 that you figured out above make sense in the graph? We got f of -1 is -4. Does that make sense here? Why does it make sense? What, Myrna? No, sorry, called you Myrna. What's a point? What point? What are the coordinates? Aha, because this says, I apologize. When x is -1, y is -4. So the point -1, -4 is on the curve. You tell me if you don't understand something. We got that f of, let me see here, f of 0 is -14. Does that make sense in the context of the problem? Why? Yeah, because as we're getting closer to 0, we can see that this thing's going way down here, right? So it's very possible that it's -14. What is this point also called? It's got another name. Perfect. The y-intercept. The y-intercept is when the graph does what?
The y-axis.
Crosses or touches the y-axis. Now look at this problem here, or this question. The graph of f of x clearly crosses the x-axis at some value between x equal -4 and x equal -1. Do you buy that? The graph crosses the x-axis somewhere between x equal -4 and x equal -1. Crosses right there, doesn't it? Now we're still reading. Based on your computations above, how could you justify that this is guaranteed to happen? Now, you may not quite understand what I'm asking you here. You all right?
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Okay. Here's the question. Based on these computations that we did right here, we said that the f of -4 is 2. And we said f of -1 was what? -4? The question is, how does knowing this guarantee that our curve crosses the x-axis between -4 and -1? What we're talking about here is a theorem that we're not going to name yet, but it's one of the big theorems. Now, let me show you what we're talking about here. F of -4 is 2. F of -1 is -4. Just by looking at those 2 points, I know my graph has to cross the x-axis. Why do I know my graph has to cross the x-axis?
There's no way to get to the other side of the x-axis without crossing.
That's it. There's no way to get from above the x-axis to below the x-axis unless I cross the x-axis. Now, there is one thing that has to happen, though. There's a word, starts with a C. If I go from here to here, do I ever have to lift my finger? Do I ever have to lift my pencil? No. That means the function is what we call continuous. Have you heard that term? Continuous means I don't have to lift my pencil. So, because this function is continuous, the only way I can get from one side of the x-axis to the other side is by crossing the x-axis. Don't write this down, but that's called the intermediate value theorem. We'll get into more detail on that considerably later. Again, this is in your filled-in notes on your classroom page. Now, are you understanding the discussions that we're having here, the things that I'm telling you? Okay. Now let's look right here. This graph has 2 zeros. Remember from Algebra 2, what is a zero of a function? Bless you. What's a zero? What's it mean? Yeah. Why would an x-intercept also be called a zero? No, yeah, what has to be 0? The y has to be 0. Okay, either the board is messing with me or one of you is doing something and messing with me because that thing was going like this. Those are the x-intercepts because that is where y is 0. The definition of an x-intercept or the definition of a zero. The definition of a zero. Any x value where y equals 0. Well, I went out of order, didn't I? Oh well. As long as you're okay. Tell me if I go out of order and it bothers you. Now let's look at the last question here. Based on the graph, we cannot determine exactly where those zeros are. Why not? Why can't we determine exactly where those zeros are? Yeah, they're in between 2 integers, aren't they? Between what pairs of x values do the zeros lie? I have a 0 between -1 and -2, and I have a 0 between -4 and -5. So far, so good? Are you thinking, I know this stuff? I hope you're thinking I know some of it. Okay. On the previous page, we took that function and found values of y by putting in x values. Now, suppose I give you y values and we want to solve for x. I want you to look at this question right here. When you solve an equation, f of x equals 0, what do the results mean graphically? What does it mean graphically? When I solve this, I'm getting some x values, right? What? I can't hear you. Maggie? It's not vertical lines. Not vertical lines. Let's try it. What does f of x mean? F of x means y. So what I want to do here is I'm setting y equal to 0. I'm setting y equal to 0, and I want to know for what x values does y equal 0? What does that look like on a graph? What x values have a y value of 0? The x-intercepts. Solving this equation right here finds my x-intercepts. We're going to do it. Now, you guys ought to be able to whip that out pretty fast, yes? I'll go tell Miss Seegert. Who else did you have for Algebra 2? Jones? Carter? Seegert, Jones, and Carter? All right, then. Let's solve this. Subtract 4, divide by -2, right? What do you get? Where do you go from there? Well, best way to do this one's square root. Let's square root both sides. What do we get? I want to ask you a question. How many answers should this have? Why 2? The biggest exponent is a 2. If I just do this, don't write this down. If I just do this, and then I solve it, how many answers am I going to have? Just 1. What did you forget? Plus or minus the square root of 2. When you take a square root, remember it's plus or minus. So x equals -3 plus or minus the square root of 2. Yeah, I want it this way. Now here's the deal. If you put -3 plus the square root of 2 on your calculator, you would get a number between -1 and -2. And if you put -3 minus the square root of 2 on your calculator, you would get a number between -4 and -5. The reason I didn't want you to go to your calculator, this is the exact answer. If you do it on the calculator, you're going to have to round. So these 2 points, -3 plus root 2, comma 0 is right here. -3 minus root 2, comma 0 is right here. You found the x-intercepts. Now I want you to look at this question right here. Hey.
How come x plus 3 squared 4?
Because we subtracted 4 from both sides, and then we divided by this -2.
Divided by the -2. Right. Yeah.
With me?
Yes.
When we solve this equation right here, before we solve it, what do the answers mean? What's f of x another name for?
Y.
This says y equals -4. Say again? Yeah. I want to know what are my x values that give me a y value of -4. Can you look at the graph and know what those answers better be right away? Where are the y values -4? Those better be our answers. So we're going to go and solve it. Negative 2 times x plus 3 quantity squared plus 4 equals negative 4. What do we do? Subtract 4, then? So that'll be what, negative 8 divided by negative 2? So x plus 3, excuse me, quantity squared equals 4. You know what? They've got a space for us to do this right here, don't they? Oh, well. Oh, well. What now? Square root both sides. I'm going to get x plus 3 equals? Yes, plus or minus 2. Now, you cannot leave this one like that. Those are easy. Negative 3 plus 2, negative 1, negative 3 minus 2. Aren't those numbers we got right there? Now, let's look right here. In summary, when you evaluate f of a, what does your answer mean graphically? Perfect. The result means the y values may be one value, may be more, when x equals a. Actually, it's only going to be 1, isn't it? Because it's just a function. When you solve this equation, what does the result mean graphically? The x values when y equals a. Did you learn anything new? No. What you learned is what everything you've done in the past means. All right. Next page. Isn't this the last page of these notes? All right. We're doing pretty good. Are we going to do all of this? Nah. We'll do some of it. Okay, let's do this part. For each of the following, use the given function. So here's our function. Here's the graph. To find either the y value given the x value or find the x value given the y value. Use the equation to do the work, but verify your answer using the graph. Can do. What's g of negative 6 asking us to find? The y value when x is negative 6. Good. So you're going to say g of negative 6 is, where are you going to put negative 6? In for x. Did you find the y value when x is negative 6? Sure did. We're going to skip. We're going to this question right here. For what values of x does g of x equal negative 4? What am I trying to find? Yes, I'm trying to find the x values when y is equal to negative 4. Where do I put negative 4? Good. So I'm going to put negative 4 equals, do you remember how to solve an absolute value? Very good. Okay. When you solve an absolute value equation, get the absolute value bars by themselves. How do we do that?
You gotta add 5.
Add 5. So this is going to be 1 equals absolute value of x plus 2. An absolute value almost always will have two answers. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I give you this. What is that asking you to find?
What numbers, when made positive?
What does it mean? What's it mean? So what does absolute value mean? Dude, I heard distance. Yes, the distance away from 0 on a number line. How many numbers are 2 units away from 0 on the number line? What are the numbers? Yeah. So x would either be -2 or +2, right? The only time this would have one answer is when this absolute value is equal to 0. Otherwise, that's going to have two answers. So I want to know, pretend you can't see what's under my hand, even though you can see it on top of my hand. I don't care what's under that absolute value. What numbers have an absolute value of 1? So what's under my hand has to be 1 or -1, doesn't it? What's under my hand? So x plus 2 has to be 1, or it has to be -1. Well, I don't know. We're on this question right here, so we're in this one here.
Okay.
Oops, dummy. X plus 2 equals -1. So what's x? -1 or -3. Now, you told me, what did we just find? The x values when y equals -4. Are those the x values when y equals -4? There's y equals -4. Paul, there they are. -1 and -3. Do you have questions so far? Abby? You okay? I was looking for, where on that graph, where are the y values -4? Well, the y values are -4 right there and right there. What are those x values? Okay? Listen, if your face, I'm going to call you on it, because that means you don't understand something you're not asking. All right? Do you have questions? Doing this and this ought to be a snap, right? Here, what do you do with the 1? Oops. The -1. Plug it into the equation. What do you do with the 10? Plug it into the equation. On each of these, what are you finding? Y values. Good. Now look down at those bottom two. What are you finding here? When the x values on y equals 1, let's do this one. We won't do this one. Take that equation, set it equal to set it equal to 1. You get that? Subtract 3, divide by -2. How do I solve that? Square both sides. Yeah. So if we square both sides, what do we get? Equals, x equals When x is -5, does y equal 1? Oh, there we go. Right there. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of that lesson. My goal is really to do the first page and the very, very top 2 things on the next page. That's all I want to get through today. All right, look at the first question. If h of 3 equals 2, that means that when x equals 3, then y equals 2. All right. Find each of the following function values using the graph. F is the dashed graph. G is the solid line. You probably want to label those so that you don't get them mixed up. Dotted line is F, yeah. And the solid line is G. All right, here we go. Again, some of these rows we're going to do 1 or 2 things and then we're moving on because I do not want to insult your intelligence. Some of you may be thinking, go ahead, insult. I need all the work I can get. Okay. What's f of -1?
6.
Right. 6. What is g of -11?
G of -11 is 1. -2. No, wait, -2.
Yeah, -2. Now, next row. What does that mean? What does f minus g of -3 mean? Exactly right. Let's see. Working on your names. Luke. Okay. So what this really means is f of -3 minus g of -3. That's what it means. That's called a combination. That's why the title of this lesson is never mind. I thought it had combinations up there. My bad. I'm a little stupid. Okay. What's f of -3? 6 minus g of -3 and 6 minus 2. Questions there? Let's go to this one right here. -2 times g of 8 minus 3 times f of 17. Where do we start? What's g of 8? -2. So this is -2 times -2 minus 3 times, I need f of 17. I don't see 17 on there. Do I know enough to figure it? Why? You know the slope. Well done. What is the slope? 1/2. So let's see here. Up 1, right 2, up 1, right 2, up 1, right 2. So that's at 15. What is it? Is it 1? What is that? 1? I agree. Questions so far?
The answer to that question is 1, right?
Right. Let's look at this one. The values of x such that f of x is -3. What am I looking for on the graph of f? Right. When does y equal negative 3? Now remember, we're on the f of x, so we're on the dotted one. When does 2? Two and 9? Yeah, I think 2 and 9. Is it 2 and 9? Yep. How about this one? The values of x such that g of x equals 4. What are we looking for? When y equals 4, 0 and 4? Yeah. X equals 0 and 4. All right, let's look at those last two. If p of x is x squared plus 2x minus 13, for what values of x is p of x equal to g of negative 3? What? Yeah. What? Yeah. What's g of, yeah, exactly. What's g of negative 3? What's g of negative 3? 2? So what do I want to know? I want to know when p of x is equal to 2. The p of x is this. Now, do you remember how to solve that little equation? Mm-hmm. Ah, thank you. Nick said set it equal to 0. Please, 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 when you solve a quadratic equation, set the dumb thing equal to 0. What do you get? X squared? What do you think? Uh-huh. So how does it factor? So x equals? Well done. Well done. Questions there? Got a question? You good?
Just need to catch up.
Okay. Can I go on and talk about this last one? This is the last problem we're going to do. If q of x is equal to this equation right here, then for what values of x is q of x equal to f of 5? What do we need to find? What's f of 5? Negative 5? I'll just believe you. Get the absolute value bars by themselves. Isolate them. Equals what? Yep. What numbers have an absolute value of 3? So that has to equal negative 3 or 3. You should have your answers. You getting 0 and 6? You're doing a good job. Tristan, I'll come back to this page in just a second, okay? We don't need to do that. I thought maybe that pertained to the previous page, but it doesn't. It pertains to this. We're done for today. Now, guys, you're doing a good job. There's that if you need it.